Good morning, everyone. Meteorologist Bill Rentschler alongside meteorologist Brad Anderson. Brad, how are you doing this morning on the Wednesday of Severe Weather Awareness Week?
I'm doing fine. Thank you.
Were you startled by the tornado sirens that we heard about 30 minutes ago?
I was not. I was expecting some kind of a sound.
That's good.
That's good that you hear it. As you hear it, that means it's working.
That's right. And again, we had kind of talked the last 2 days. There was going to be a practice tornado drill this morning at 10 a.m. and I think everything went off fairly well.
This is what these tests are for, right?
Make sure it's still working.
And it didn't work.
Then there's a problem.
There's a problem. Things get fixed. Just in time for when severe weather does happen.
Yeah, so a good opportunity again to practice our severe weather plans, which we've been talking about the last couple days. Today we're talking about tornadoes and tornado safety, which is kind of the popular topic. A lot of folks like tornadoes. They're see the video of them and they're really beautiful and really powerful and kind of awe-inspiring. But we've seen video from earlier this week. I can actually.
My favorite tornadoes are the ones that are in the middle of an empty field.
Middle of nowhere.
That's right. That don't impact anybody.
Doing nothing.
So,
this is actually
those are the
video
ones
from this last weekend at Rolling Fork down in Mississippi from a tornado that occurred late at night. And again, basically wiped out almost the whole entire town. So again, this is why we talk about. This is what. E4, right? Yeah, I believe it was E4. So this is why we tell everyone to have their plan in place. We would rather have you have it and not need it, rather than be caught in a situation like the poor folks were in this scenario and potentially not have that plan ready to go. So again, that's what we've been talking about all week today, tornadoes and tornado safety. And we'll kind of just dive right in. The first thing, Brad, again, I've shown this graphic every day. We'll show it every day this week. But again, and we just talked about it, but this is the week to get your plan ready to go. Stay weather aware. You'll hear us say that on those severe weather days. Have multiple ways to get your weather information.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's right. Exactly. Not just 10-11 on TV news or, cut-ins with severe weather, but have the 10-11 Now weather app if you haven't downloaded that. That is easy to do. Facebook, Twitter will get you those warnings, watches and warnings, as well as NOAA weather radio. That's still a very good thing to have, especially at night. Have a siren go off if there's any kind of severe weather, or an alarm, I should say. And of course, have that communication plan in place if there is severe weather.
Yeah, you never know if potentially, the cell towers go down during a severe weather event, and all of a sudden your phone maybe isn't functional anymore. And so how are you going to get the weather information, NOAA weather radio, stuff like that? So multiple ways to kind of to get all the necessary information. Of course, we want you to download that 10-11 Now weather app because we're giving you all that information.
It's another source, exactly.
It is. Yep. So if we look at last year, and just, again, we've talked about this graphic before on Monday, but just a look at last year, it was a pretty quiet year in terms of actual tornadoes in Nebraska. We like that. Makes our job a little bit easier, a little bit less stressful. But we did have 26 confirmed tornadoes in 2022 in Nebraska.
Yeah, that is amazing. I mean, 41 is the average and 26, so well below average. April 10th, May 6th, June 9th, there was, what is that, one there?
One in July.
One in July, so there was a total of 10 in April, 6 in May, and then 9 in June and just 1 in July. There'll be a later statistic that just kind of amazes me that we'll talk about later on this graphic.
And one of the most important numbers on the screen there is 0 deaths. Love to see that. There were 2 injuries, but 0 deaths, a very important number for us in the state of Nebraska. Our strongest tornado was an EF2. That was back in mid-June of last year in York County. That's estimated wind speeds of about 111 to 135 miles an hour. Of the 26 tornadoes we had last year, 15 of them were rated an EFU, which basically means, Brad, those are our favorite ones because it was in the middle of the field. It did no damage whatsoever. So the National Weather Service sends out the survey teams and they look for damage to give these tornadoes a rating. They couldn't find any damage, so it's an EFU. So it could have been, it could have been 300 plus mile an hour winds, but it just kind of spins the grass around.
It was just, blowing around some cedar trees. Something like that. Or
That's it.
You can't really tell.
Yeah.
Because remember, the EF scale is based on the damage. It's pretty much after the fact how they rank those tornadoes. So.
And we'll look at that in just a moment.
Yes, we will.
Some good foreshadowing there. 2 EF0s, 8 EF1s, and like we just mentioned, the strongest we had last year in Nebraska was an EF2. The longest track tornado was just about 9.5 miles or so, and that was July 3rd into July 4th. It went from Hall into Merrick counties. The widest tornado, the greatest width we had was 400 yards, which, I mean, when you think about it, 400 yards is pretty big.
4 football fields.
It's 4 football
basically.
fields, but in tornado terms, that's actually a fairly thin circulation. I mean, I think the widest ever is over a mile.
The widest, I think, is over like 2.5 miles. The one that happened in Oklahoma, I think.
El Reno, I
Several
think.
years ago,
Yeah, so
Hallam was the widest up until that point.
that's true. That's true. So our first tornado was April 17th, Seward County. It was rated an EFU, and Brad, you mentioned it, but the last tornado we had in all of 2022
Was that?
July 3rd into July 4th. Hall and Merritt counties. It happened late at night into the past midnight into July 4th.
And it amazes me. I mean, it's good. It's good news. It's great, but even though we know that our peak months are May and June, you still expect a few tornadoes in the rest of July, August, even September and October some years. Just to have a fact that the last one was in early July, that was the one part that kind of amazed me. I don't think I've ever really seen one we'd not have a tornado end on July 4th.
It would have been nice for us to know that was going to be the last one. But
yes.
But we didn't know.
We did not know. That's right.
It would have made our job just a little bit easier. So that's a look at kind of the season last year in Nebraska. But how does a tornado form? We're still not, we kind of know the basics, but why one thunderstorm produces a tornado and one other one doesn't, we still don't know.
A lot of times we have those supercells. There's circulation and everything. That particular supercell doesn't drop the tornado, and some of them do. Why are some stronger than others? So there are still questions, and of course that's what researchers, meteorologists are still trying to figure out.
Yep. So basically, again, if we kind of go through the process, you have surface winds blowing in one direction, you have stronger upper level winds, or maybe in a different direction. So that's the wind shear that we need for the potential for severe weather. And basically that gives us a rotating column of air. And
now, you can't see this. The air is invisible, so you're not going to see a big horizontal tube up there.
No, you won't. And then those thunderstorm updrafts basically take that rotating column of air, and they kind of turn it from a horizontal column of rotating air to a vertical column of rotating air. So this is the rotation of a supercell thunderstorm we talk about. This is what makes a supercell thunderstorm a supercell thunderstorm. That's is that rotation.
That rotation. Mesocyclone in the whole storm system. So eventually you get a lowering there, you get the wall cloud, and then eventually that rotating column of air continues to build downwards. Now it doesn't reach the ground, it's just called a funnel. But once it officially reaches the ground, it is a tornado. So, and sometimes, you may not even see the tornado initially. You may not even see the tornado until it actually reaches ground and actually picks up debris, dust, and dirt. Because sometimes we don't see the initial tornado developing, maybe because it's a dry air. But so
there's
sometimes,
no condensation funnel.
right? So again, sometimes it doesn't happen all the time, but there are places, especially in drier areas, you might have again not much visibility until it actually starts to pick up that dirt and dust and other debris.
So that's the kind of the basics of how a tornado actually forms. Brad, you mentioned this earlier, but this is how we rate the tornadoes, is on the enhanced Fujita scale. This is something that came out several years ago. There was Dr. Fujita who created the Fujita scale back in the 70s. They did some tinkering and they put out the enhanced Fujita scale. And again, so this is all basically based on damage.
Right. We still have, sometimes Doppler radar, we still can't just, look at a tornado or have Doppler radar and just say, that's in EF3. That has, 136 mile per hour winds. So most of the time we rank these tornadoes, or I should say the National Weather Service survey teams, rank these tornadoes by the damage that they do.
And so we kind of have 3 categories. Weak is EF0 and EF1. So that you're talking kind of minor to moderate damage. They can still, do plenty of damage, but you're talking wind speeds 65 to 85 for an EF0, 86 to 110 for an EF1. You get above an EF1, you're talking about a strong tornado. EF2, EF3, again, you're talking considerable to severe damage in these cases. Again, winds anywhere between 111, about 165 miles an hour. And thankfully, we don't deal with these very much, but the violent tornadoes are EF4s, EF5s, again, what we saw in Mississippi this last weekend, I believe, like you said, was given a preliminary EF4 rating. But this is, I mean, those tornadoes end up giving us that drone footage like we saw, where it's just everything's gone, everything's destroyed.
And the good news, EF4, especially EF5, are relatively rare. So it doesn't happen very often, so that's the good news. But when they do, they cause most of the injuries and the deaths.
Yeah,
right,
they're
Bill?
less than 2% of all tornadoes are those EF4, EF5s, but they are responsible for the large majority of all tornado-related deaths.
That is right. So then, of course, 10% of all tornadoes are ranked EF2, EF3, and then is that 80 to 90% EF0 to EF1. So yes, the majority of the tornadoes are the weaker ones, but as you mentioned before, even some of these weak tornadoes can cause damage, and if you're not prepared, you can get injured, even in some of those weaker tornadoes.
Absolutely. So this is a look at the actual number of confirmed tornadoes in the state of Nebraska since 1950. And I guess I first want to shout out to the weather office in Omaha. Well, all the weather offices across the state, I'm sure they all contribute to this data and they share it with us. And so you can see it's very much kind of up and down. If you look at the 10-year rolling average, we have been kind of going down. If you go back to 1950 through 2022, the average is 41. The 30-year average is 49.
Yeah.
And again, last year was down. We only had the 26. The year before, we had just over 40. A majority of those came in December of 2021, which was very odd. But again, shows that severe weather can happen at any time.
Exactly. I mean, it does look like you can see there on this that there's been kind of a downward trend in the number of tornadoes per year compared to what we had, which looks like in the later 90s and the 2000, 2004. Thank you. I can't see very well that far away, so that's why I was squinting. But again, you can see that it's up and down. So even we haven't had as many tornadoes in recent years in Nebraska. That doesn't mean it's always going to stay that way. I mean, any year we could see a higher potential tornado, so we just don't know from year to year. And eventually, we eventually at some point could start to see greater number of tornadoes. So every year has that potential.
And the only thing in here in this data that I would say is maybe a little bit misleading is maybe the first, I don't know, 10, 20 years. Just because there were, I mean, no cell phones, there was no Twitter, there was nothing. A lot of the times these tornadoes happen in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And, nowadays, everyone's got a phone, can snap a picture, can send it to the weather service, can send it to, the TV station or whatever, and report that tornado. And so, in 1950, the data shows there was less than 10 tornadoes.
Yeah, you have storm
chasers. I doubt
chasers.
that was actually probably the case.
That's right, yeah. I mean, this is why they even started in 1950. I mean, we all know that there were tornadoes before that, but, the number of tornadoes were unreliable. A lot of people probably, on the farm maybe saw a tornado in the field and didn't even think anything about it. It was never reported or anything like that. So you're exactly right. It is a little bit misleading, especially in the early years, but then as more time went on, as more people were trained to see what an actual tornado was, and you had emergency management, a lot of sheriffs would report tornadoes to the National Weather Service. So it's a lot. The data is much more reliable, I think, over the last 50 to 60 years.
Yes, absolutely. So that's a look by year. If you break it down by month, again, it makes sense. Our, severe weather season is probably, really May, June into July. And if you look at the actual number of tornadoes, 1950 through last year, you have about 85% that occur between April and July, and even April, it's only 264 out of the 3,000, I believe, or so tornadoes. The interesting thing on this graphic is the 33 in December, which again, most of those came from December of 2021.
That's right, because before wasn't it just like 3 tornadoes?
It was like November, January, and February.
Very low.
It was single digits. It was very low. Again, but it was one of those things we would always say, look, it can happen anytime, but very rare. And then all of a sudden, December, I believe it was like December 15th or something like that, 2021, there's that derecho that moved through, and tornadoes from south central Nebraska all the way through eastern parts of the state. And it was a weird day.
It was a weird day. And so again, whether it's January or February, it can happen.
Anytime, and it can happen at any time of day.
That's right.
This is, again, awesome data provided to us by the National Weather Service. Again, nocturnal tornadoes are generally some of the most deadly, just because, again, it's night. We cannot see them. It makes it that much more difficult for storm spotters to accurately or reliably say that there is a tornado on the ground. But most of our severe weather and most of our tornadoes come in the afternoon and into the early evening hours due to the heating of the day and the solar cycle.
Yeah, late afternoon, early evening, as you can see here on the graphic. One of the problems, I think, for the southeast part of the United States, one of several reasons is why there seems to be higher death tolls there, is because a lot of those tornadoes do occur at night after dark. Can catch a lot of people off guard. Another reason, there's a lot of trees and stuff like that, so, and sometimes a lot of rain-wrapped tornadoes, so people can't really see that. So there are reasons for higher death tolls in the southern part of the United States, but again, most of our tornadoes do happen during the daylight hours.
Yep, and that's because basically with the heating of the day, that's when we see our most amount of thunderstorms occur is in the afternoon into the early evening.
Most unstable part of the day, the atmosphere is most unstable.
That's right. So if we look at, unfortunately, I don't have updated data for our tornado tracks, Brad. I have hunted for this data. Unfortunately, I didn't mark down where I got it from when I originally put these graphics together, so it makes me sad. So I have 1950 through 2017, so we're missing a couple years.
Yeah.
But these are all the tornado tracks of all tornadoes from 1950 to 2017. So you can see, again, across the entire state, they happen everywhere. So if you break it down, these are the EF0 tornado tracks. And one thing I'd like to point out just about the EF0, again, oftentimes they're usually, again, on the weaker side, and they're usually on the short-lived side. So you can see lots of little dots. For, I would say, a vast majority of these EF0 tornadoes across much of the state. If you start to go up in intensity, the lines, I think, tend to get just a little bit longer. EF1 tornadoes, again, we see lots of these across all of the state. EF2, again, a good chunk of these. A lot of them kind of in near Grand Island from, the night of the Twisters back in the mid-'80s.
1980.
1980. Thank you, Brad. Welcome. But again, plenty of those across the state. But then we start to see fewer and fewer once we get past EF2, EF3 tornadoes. Again, kind of a cluster, kind of in south central and parts of southeastern Nebraska is where I'd say there's the majority of those EF3s. EF4s, there's even fewer. The one you see in southern Lancaster, that was the Hallam tornado.
That's the Hallam tornado.
Back in the 2000s.
You can see one in the Omaha area from 1975. That was the 1975 Omaha tornado. So again, at that time an F4.
And I believe, kind of hard to tell, but a couple of them up in northeastern Nebraska, I believe, were the Pilger tornadoes. Back about probably almost 10 years ago.
2014, I believe it was.
9 years ago. And for EF5, just one.
Just one, 1964, sometimes called the Bradshaw tornado. So, fortunately, at least since 1950, we've only had one EF5 or
F5 at the time.
So they don't happen a lot. And even here in Nebraska, they don't happen a lot. But that doesn't mean they can't.
It only takes one. It only takes one time. And, it's probably more a matter of statistics. And, it will happen again. It's just we don't know when.
Exactly.
And that's why we want everyone to have that plan.
And would you like to tell everyone, at least in the Lincoln area, that Lincoln is not protected?
Lincoln is not protected. There's, we always like to kind of joke and have fun that there's a dome or that Lincoln's in a valley and so we'll never get hit by a tornado. And that's not true. It's not true. Again, we're talking it's a matter of statistics. It's a matter of probability. It will happen. And I would hate for anyone to be under some illusion and not take their precautions and follow their plan because they think, oh, well, it's never going to happen in Lincoln.
It's a matter of time, as you said, and Lincoln is also, growing, so more land is being used up. So it is a matter of time, and fortunately, it's a long time, but we can't really say when, of course. But again, like you just said, be prepared. Even here in Lincoln, there's nothing really protecting. There's nothing protecting us from tornadoes. No valley, no ridge.
Tornadoes can cross rivers. They don't. That's not. Again, we talked about Omaha. Omaha's been hit twice by two fairly significant tornadoes. The Easter tornado back in the early 1900s, and then the other tornado in the 1970s.
Yeah.
So again,
and that's very hilly in Omaha.
It is. So it can happen, and we want everyone to be ready and be prepared. But what do you do to be ready and be prepared? Again, kind of a lot of information on this graphic, so we'll kind of read through it here. But tornado safety before the tornado. Again, we've harped on this. be ready, be weather ready, have your plan, and know what the risk is that day. Kind of pay attention to the forecast. Again, maybe during the winter, you can kind of get away with not paying as much attention to the weather. But, in the spring and in the summer, especially if you have outdoor plans, you need to know kind of, is there a threat in my area or is there not?
Yeah, exactly.
Have that plan ready to go. Again, especially if you have young kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old at home. Brad, you have young kids. Well, you had young kids.
I did have
They're
one at one
now.
time. I'm older and they are too.
But I'm sure you went through a plan with them. They knew exactly where to go. If you weren't home, I'm sure they knew what to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Have that plan ready to go. Also, at your place of work as well. If you don't know, hey, where am I supposed to go at work? Ask today, or this week. Ask, where do we go?
Yeah, that's what, severe weather awareness is, the, tornado drill, all of that is to kind of find out, hey, you know what, I don't know where we're supposed to go when there's a tornado at work. So you might want to ask somebody whether a designated tornado shelter is.
Find that shelter. So pick a safe room in your house to kind of be that shelter. If you live in a mobile home, you need to identify a nearby shelter that you can get to quickly. And very quickly, in just a few minutes. And if it takes more than 5 minutes to get there, if a warning's issued for you, you probably need to have left earlier, maybe when there was a watch issued or something like that.
Right, and of course, if you are in a mobile home, you should leave that mobile home, and if you don't have time to get to a sturdier shelter, then the rules of being outside or in a car, basically lie in a ditch or a ravine or a culvert or something like that, goes into effect, again, for mobile homes or campers or anything like that.
And we also want to say, when we talk about mobile homes a lot with tornadoes, just... That's not to say that anyone living in a mobile home or mobile homes are bad, but
they don't attract.
They don't
tornadoes.
attract, but you are we're talking about the mobile home's anchor to the ground,
right?
Which is not strong enough, and so you're not. Sometimes the messaging of mobile homes are for people who aren't well off or anything. It's nothing to do with that. It's just that mobile homes are not built to be a strong enough shelter.
A lot of them are not, tied to the ground or, to the ground or to a foundation or anything like that. So they do tend to get damaged more often just because they're able to be, picked up by a certain tornado. Of course, that flying around is just like a car. Flying around, if you're inside, you're going to have problems.
That's right. And also prepare an emergency kit. Again, if you do have to go take shelter in your safe place, it's a good thing to have maybe some things down there already. Things like bike helmets, motorcycle helmet if you've got a motorcycle, something to protect your head, old pair of shoes. Again, if there is damage to your house or home and you need to extricate yourself, it's good to have a pair of shoes, bottled water, cell phone charger, stuff like that there in your shelter already, and not be trying to get all that stuff as you're getting to your shelter.
Especially if you do have damage, your neighborhood has damage, there's going to be it's probably pretty hard to find all that stuff.
That's right. And then we kind of talked about this yesterday, but know what the warnings are. Know how your community sends out warnings. Have a place to get your warnings. Again, whether it's the 1011 Now weather app, whether you're relying on us on TV to get those warnings out to you, social media, NOAA weather radio, just have a way to get those warnings.
Yeah, and not only that, know the county that you're in, maybe know the counties that are around you, or maybe especially to the west, southwest, northwest of you, just because if you know that hear it on TV or social media or something like that, what county's being affected, and that's not too far away, you'll have even more time to prepare as it moves into your county.
That's right. So then during a tornado, again, continue to try and listen to your weather source, whether it's local news, NOAA weather radio, to be updated, know maybe when that tornado has passed or that storm has passed. If you're in your house, go to your basement, again, safe room, and then don't forget to stay away from windows. Don't forget pets if time allows. If you're at work or school, again, follow the tornado drill. Get to your safe place quickly and calmly. Stay away from the windows. Do not go to large open rooms. I was talking with Liam, my oldest, about doing tornado drills, because I'm assuming they did one today at school, and he asked if they should go to the gym. And I was like, no. No. Large open auditoriums, again, generally we see the roof collapse. And so that's not a place that we want to go. Brad, you mentioned this, but if you're outside or in a vehicle,
That's right.
You're in a tough spot.
you're in a tough spot, but again, there are ways that you could, seek shelter if you can find a sturdy building. I mean, if you were knocking on my door, I would let you in, Bill.
Yeah, absolutely. You knock on someone's door. I mean, they'll let you inside in a situation like that. Again, if you're in a vehicle, try and get out of the vehicle. Best thing to do is find the closest shelter. If you can't make it to a safe shelter, either get down in your car and cover your head, or abandon your car and seek shelter in a low-lying area or a ditch or ravine. Again, if you're in your vehicle, that vehicle may get tossed around. So then,
and of course, don't seek shelter
under an overpass. That is correct.
So that is not a safe place at all.
That is one of the worst places you could go. There was thinking way back when, I think that, and one of the frustrating, I really like the Superman movie, Man of Steel, with Henry Cavill. But one of the worst scenes in that movie is, again, they're growing up in Kansas and they take shelter under the overpass during the tornado, and that is, it acts as a wind tunnel. Yeah,
for those, there was video in 1991 of this tornado in Kansas that was following, or I guess you could say was chasing, a news crew. And, it was, they were on the highways, but the tornado was catching up because it was moving diagonally. So they went under an overpass and seek shelter. There are a few other people there, and everything seemed to be fine. The tornado went over them, or at least near them, and they seemed like they were fine, no injuries. But again, with that particular situation, it did not hit them directly, and it was a weaker tornado. A few years later, a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot, but several people in Oklahoma seek shelter under an overpass, and a lot of those people were injured and killed. So again, bottom line, overpasses, not the safe place to be during a tornado.
Yep, they basically act as a wind tunnel and will actually enhance wind speeds as that wind passes through the tunnel. So then after the tornado, again, continue to stay informed. Again, local authorities, again, especially if there's damage in your area, are probably going to be trying to get rescue crews and emergency responders out to all the hardest hit areas. Contact your loved ones, make sure that they're okay. Again, friends and family in the area. Again, cell service may be spotty at that time, so you may not be able to get a hold of them. That's again goes back to your plan. If there is something, where do we meet?
Right.
This is our meeting location after the fact. Assess the damage after the threats ended. Check for damage in your home. Again, this is where I talked about shoes. You want sturdy shoes, long sleeve shirt, long pants. And then help your neighbor. Again, if you come across people that are injured, and especially if you're trained, provide first aid to victims that need that until the first responders can arrive.
Yeah, it's also important to keep in mind, if you are around damage, to be aware of power lines. You don't want to be messed around too much, especially if power lines have fallen and they're live. A lot of people do get injured after. A lot of people after disasters, hurricanes, tornadoes tend to get injured afterwards because of power lines and other hidden dangers.
Yep, very important as well. So that basically wraps up, I guess, most of what we were talking about. But Brad, I thought we'd take a look really quick at the severe weather outlooks. We talked about these SPC outlooks yesterday. Again, you're going to see us use these all the time because today, again, not much of an issue, but tomorrow there is at least a marginal risk in Nebraska for some severe weather. Again, we talked yesterday, the marginal means just isolated severe storms are possible. We're talking, again, low end, probably severe weather events, but still.
Still a possibility. Still could see large hail and damaging wind, and it's primarily, again, I think late Thursday for north central and parts of northeastern section of the state. Right now, I think for the Lincoln area, of course, there's a chance for thunderstorms. That light shade of green there indicating just maybe general thunderstorms or non-severe storms. Things could change over the next 24 hours, but as of right now, we may see a storm in Lincoln, but not expected to reach severe levels at this time.
And then Friday, just off to our east at least, again, kind of a wide swath of area under the potential for some of those severe storms. Again, an enhanced risk, that 3 out of 5, more of a threat for the day on Friday for basically Iowa all the way down to the kind of Ark-La-Tex region in the southeast.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you are by chance traveling on Friday to the east, there will be a pretty good chance for severe weather, Iowa and Missouri, Illinois, down towards Tennessee and Arkansas. So, at least for this event, it doesn't look like much for severe weather for Nebraska, but just a sign that we're heading into spring.
The seasons are changing.
The seasons are changing.
So, again, appreciate everyone for tuning in, for watching. Again, tomorrow, Melissa and myself will kind of go over some of the weather sources that we talked about, where you can get your severe weather information and things like that. And if you want to, again, you can scan that QR code. Again, yesterday, Brandon and I talked about weather warnings. Monday, Ken and I talked about kind of just severe thunderstorms. You can scan that QR code. It'll take you to 1011now.com, to the web story we have listed there with all of the videos from this week. So again, if you missed a day, you can go back and review it. Maybe if you're an educator and you're trying to maybe talk about severe weather in your classroom or something like that, these will be valuable videos, even outside of Severe Weather Awareness Week, that you can kind of bookmark them and use them in the future. Yeah,
I mean, even if we come up to have a severe weather potential day, event day, or something like that, it might be good to review these. And again, if you're ever in a classroom, be able to show those videos again. All
right. Anything else that we need to add at all, Brad?
No, other than the fact that you just did a marvelous job with those graphics and everything like that.
You did an even better job helping me present them, Brad, so I appreciate that.
I'm just standing here.
Well, I appreciate everyone for tuning in and for watching. Again, Brad will probably have some more of these graphics in the noon show today. And then Brandon, who I believe is doing all the shows this evening, will obviously probably have a little bit more. But this is a nice space where we can kind of spend a little bit more time going a little bit more in-depth on these topics.
Right. Exactly.
So appreciate everyone for tuning in and for watching. Again, keep it tuned to 1011, both on air and online, for all of your news, weather, and sports. For Brad Anderson, I'm Bill Rentschler, and hope everyone